Hey, all right. This is only I think you're muted, Ken.
Muted. Oh, I am muted.
It's all right. That was pretty good, though. We did our best with that transition.
I don't know what happened at the end. It glitched out. 5 seconds left.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, so welcome everybody. EKF Live episode 3, right? Episode 3.
Episode 3.
Got a busy week ahead of us. This is kind of the official, unofficial kickoff of tournament week. So we're going to get into some things that we need to discuss and address for our upcoming Winnie event. We want to make a couple things clear about some particular ramps, and then we're going to have the one and only Jake Angulas on with us. We're going to talk about Great Sacandaga. If we all can remember that long ago, it seems like forever ago. We had a tournament there, and Jake had a good day. So we're going to talk about that, and then get into some winning discussions.
Sweet.
Yeah. What do you think?
Looking forward to it.
All right. You want to start, Ken, with this, or do you want me to start with the ramp situation?
It doesn't matter. Yeah. It's not a good situation. That's what it is. So yeah, if you guys read the email, Molten Borough changed their. I don't even know if they changed anything. They took control of all the ramps. When we used to get a permit, those ramps were included. And the town, a lot of complaints from residents and a lot of complaints from people there on vacation that they would show up to a ramp and there'd be a bunch of bass boats there doing a tournament and all that stuff. So as happens often on lakes like that with a lot of rich people, a lot of money talks. And so the town took control of the ramps and made them essentially resident only. So no tournament permits are being issued for those ramps after Memorial Day. And unfortunately, that we couldn't talk them into letting us have full access like we have in the past. But luckily, we were allowed to take up 10 spots at each ramp at States Landing, Lee's Mills, and then there is the Long Island Beach ramp that still says public ramp online, ironically. But we can launch there, can't park there. That's the difference. The other two, we have 10 spots at each and only 10 spots. And anybody going over that runs the risk of getting a ticket, getting towed. The first 10 people that are there will have to put something in their windows that says EKF tournament. We were talking about doing giving a pass, showing up at the ramps and giving out passes, but we're not so sure that's going to work.
There's not enough of us for number one, but
right, yeah. One, we have to get there before everybody else, and there's always going to be somebody there that gets there early. We're not supposed to, the chief of police said absolutely no camping in the parking lot. So we don't want anybody showing up at like 1 a.m. and being like, "Well, I didn't sleep, so I wasn't camping." Yeah. So let's we need people to be reasonable. And just be professional.
And to be clear, we're not going to be giving out permits. If you're one of the first 10 at States or Lee's, you need to put something in your window on your dash so it can be read that you're part of the tournament. But there can only be 10. This is going to be an honor system.
Yeah, right? An honor system, angler responsibility type thing. Work with each other, no fighting. The first 10 get together, put something. If you put EKF tournament and then put a 1, then the next person puts a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then when you get 10, you just make sure it's in your window, and then you should be good to go. You'll be good to go. The town knows about it. The people that go through the parking lot checking the passes and all that stuff will know about it, and we'll remind the chief of police the day before the event so he can let people know.
But this is important, right? That you remember this, because we can't. EKF has no pull on this stuff. We have what we have in terms of access. So if you find yourself if there's a pass on your dash, you don't put a pass on your dash, and you end up getting a ticket or grief from the folks around, EKF can only. This is all that we can do. And so if you think you're gonna try to just be number 11 and no one will notice, EKF cannot save you in that. This is all we can do, and it was, Ken put a lot of time and work just to get this. So it's one of those things. You're representing EKF. Please don't put us in a tough position. And again, we can't bail you out of anything. So please, take the time, hear what we're saying now, and we'll articulate it again during the captain's meeting. But please, be responsible, be respectful.
Yeah, it's not ideal, but I mean, we're actually lucky to have just that. You know, the easiest thing for us to do would have been to just say, you can't launch at these. All of these launches are off limits now. But the good thing is, or another good thing, sort of good thing, is that anybody can launch there. There's no limit to the amount of people that can launch there, only to those that can park. So if you can find some off-site parking nearby, we've tried. You know, we tried to reach out to the campground near Long Island Beach, and they said they're full and all that stuff. So, but if you can find some, you know, roadside parking or, anywhere else, some sort of public, you know, if you want to go park at the high school or something, shuttle yourself back, if you know, stuff like that's okay. Or have somebody drop you off. That's probably the easiest thing, or carpool with somebody, you know.
Yeah.
So there's no limit to the amount of anglers that can go there, just the amount of anglers that can park. So again, not ideal, but it's the best we can do. It just definitely sucks.
Yeah. Well, the other thing we've been asked a lot too about is we have no special arrangements for pre-fishing. The access during pre-fishing hours is like that due diligence is up to the anglers, but also like follow the signs and what you hear. I don't think there's a problem for most of the ramps. Is the tournaments that are what make it a problematic thing, but we don't have any arrangements for that, and pre-fishing is not something that we kind of enforce in terms of that access. So just kind of do due diligence and try to be patient with folks who might give you a hard time. So okay, we good with that?
I'm good. That's if you have any questions, reach out. If you have any ideas, or if you know a place that would nearby that might let us park there, let people park there, let us know. Just make sure it's not, if you do find some offsite parking, make sure it's not like somebody's house that you paid them. And if if you find something, let us know. But it definitely can't be a person's house. Somebody asked me that actually. If they paid like a local guy, if they could park in their driveway, and that won't work. That's it. Not a good situation. Not a good way to start this off, but best we can do.
We just want to make sure we want to get it out to everybody now, though, so you have the week to prepare, to adjust your plan, whatever the case may be.
Plenty of other good areas on the lake too.
That's the part that's been like as we've been working through this. It's like it's just one area. It just happens to be like a big area.
But it's a very large area. Yeah.
But it's like it's not all doom and gloom for the rest of the lake, luckily.
All right, so let's bring on.
All right, tonight's guest. Should I go through the spiel? I should. So our guest tonight, you all know him, Jake Angulas. He has 4 EKF wins, 12 top 10s, and his career earnings with us over, I think, all 4 of our seasons is a sum of over $15,000. So somebody who's had a lot of success with us, a fellow New Hampshireite. I think that was something we're confused about in the first one.
But yeah, call you stuff?
I think so. I think that's it.
You don't have anything like Masshole?
I mean, you say we, like I didn't pick it.
Snappy?
I mean, yeah.
All right.
Anyway,
all right.
Without further ado, let's try to do this transition.
Yeah, this trend. John's not here. John's the one that normally does this for us. So give us a second. What did he say? Hit this button. Oh, it doesn't look right.
You got to bring Jake up the main stage.
There we go.
You got to promote him, then you got to unmute him. Jake.
There we go.
How we doing? Can you guys hear me?
Oh, it's working.
Yeah. We did it.
Perfect.
Wasn't quite seamless, but we got there.
We got there. So how's it going, Jake?
It is going great. Do you think there's going to be any Uber drivers that can shuttle people back and forth at 3:30 in the morning?
I mean, you could
That
probably
could be some
find
quick money.
somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, that might be an option for some people.
Just call somebody up and say, hey, $5 there and back.
Yeah.
That might work.
That must be how they've gotten control of the ramps, right? Is they've gotten control of the parking.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, there's no.
Yeah, that's what they do up here. If it's a public body of water, they figure out a way to remove the parking.
Yeah.
You have no choice. You can't fish there. So it's still public, but you can't.
Yeah,
launch.
it's like you can fish here, but you can't.
Yeah, remember a couple of years ago when the 5 Live thing was happening, which was a lot of fun, by the way. Somebody should bring it back. But Brundle launched at this tiny pond and blew it up. Crushing it. One of those little ponds just loaded with small fish. And the people there got so mad because then some other people went there after, and the homeowners they did something to where it was a small area that you could launch from, and they took it away. Yeah. And now there's still a public strip, like a strip that they don't own, but it's like all weeds and brambles and all kinds of stuff. So you just basically can't get in there anymore.
Yeah, I've lost a couple public lakes near me that the town just votes on it at one of the towns, and then the next time you go, it's just gone. It stinks, but
you can't fight it, really. I mean, what are you gonna do, right? You know, sue a lake association, you know?
Yeah.
You try, it'll be expensive.
Yeah.
But anyway, on a happier note, congratulations, Jake, on your win in Great Sacandaga. It feels like it was last season at this point, but but congrats.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It was a really fun event. I was surprised by that lake. Tons of numbers.
Surprised in a good way? Like what you were thinking wasn't going to be so good?
Yeah. It actually fished a lot better than what I thought it was going to fish. I caught a ton of fish every single day I was there. My first day of practice, I went up and pre-practiced for 2 days before. And the first day was really windy. I got there, and it was pretty slow. I didn't catch them great. I was fishing a lot deeper, kind of poking around on some offshore stuff. And I caught some fish, but it wasn't really anything to write home about. And then my second day of practice up there, pre-practicing, I got onto a bite in the last 2-3 hours before I drove home. And I just rolled that into my next 2 days of pre-fishing before the event, and just got on a really, really hot stretch where I was catching. The day before the tournament, I caught 100 fish in this stretch easily, and I wasn't letting up on them because they were just so fun to catch, and there was so many fish there, and I knew I didn't have to really let up on them just because the numbers of fish I was seeing, and I was getting a bigger size class, which I knew was going to be super important at this tournament, just seeing how many 15s and 16s were in that place. So I ended up finding a really good stretch, about a mile long. I had it all to myself, and really started keying in on a jerkbait bite. And a jerkbait, I do throw a jerkbait. It's not my number one favorite bait to throw, but once I saw the way they were reacting to that bait and the amount of fish I was pulling up off the piles, I really saw the potential for that jerkbait bite to be really good. But smallmouth and jerkbaits and me don't get along super, super well. I lose a lot of fish on them. But I started to dial in my combo to what I was throwing the bait on this year, and really saw a really great high hook to land ratio the more I dialed in my combos and started playing around with different leader material and different rods, and started to find a couple key rods that really helped me through this tournament. And I was running a lot of mono leaders just to give me a little bit of stretch, like a braid to mono, so that when I was snapping it and I would hook one mid-snap, it wasn't completely no stretch there, because I felt like I was ripping the hooks, like on this Vision one with the smaller hooks. I was running a mono leader, but then when I got up into stuff like the World Minnow, the Shimano World Minnow, I was throwing that on straight fluoro just because it has those beefier hooks on there, and I wasn't breaking hooks off. As you can see, even with the mono leader, I broke that hook off.
Oh, you broke it off?
Yeah, and
wow.
that was
not hard.
Left and right just because of how many fish I was catching in a day. But then I really got keyed in on the bigger fish wanted these bigger baits. So this was one of the key baits I threw. This is a Raid Japanese jerkbait. It's a bigger bait. Here's it against the standard Vision. You can see it's got that bigger profile. And I was throwing this and getting some bigger bites. And then I was also mixing in this Bill Lewis scope stick, and you guys can see there's not much paint left on it.
Oh,
wow. Yeah.
And all the hooks are just mangled. And then I also mixed in this OSP. It's just got all these baits have different noises to them, and some fish like the little finesse. This is like the Vision 110 +1 Junior. And I was just rotating through the baits, but then I started to key in on certain that they really liked this. The big fish wanted a big meal, and this perch scope stick was a really good bait for me. It's a sinking bait, so I did a lot of research on this place, and they draw it down. So I sat on Google Earth for probably close to like 8 to 10 hours, just going around the lake, and knowing that it was going to be a pre-spawn tournament, and these fish should be flooding the bank because we're going to be like 2 to 3 weeks before the spawn. I knew if the water temps were going to be there, that a lot of these fish were going to push shallow. And the most obvious cover on this lake was I believe when the water was really high when we were there. So I believe what they are is to block the wind from people's docks. It was like rock jetties. And overall, these banks were pretty barren. Like, there wasn't a ton of stuff on these banks. There was a lot of sand, some small gravel. There was like no grass in the areas I was in. So, but these rock piles, all these veins, I had 2 stretches of the lake that I really caught them in. And it was just 2 really good stretches that had a ton of those veins. And I was just using my 360, letting it pan in front of me. And I had marked all these veins during pre-fishing the day before. So I probably had 60 of these veins that were really, really productive. And then I caught a couple fish just really random out off the veins, floating around in like 20 foot of water, because the veins were up in 5 to 10 foot. And that's why I had so many jerk baits on. A lot of people were asking me why I had so many different baits on. I had this one if they were in like 15 foot on the veins, because I was fishing different sections of the veins throughout the day because they were pushing up the veins throughout the day. So like in the morning, I started with this guy because it was sinking. It was getting me down. I'd sink it down past the vein, sink it down and crack it over the top, and I could get it down to those fish a lot faster. Even some of my veins went out to like 20 foot of water. So I could sink this down onto them, that scope stick. And then this one was a lot shallower of a diving bait. I was actually throwing this on a straight chatterbait rod with 15-pound fluorocarbon. I had so many jerk baits on, I just had to improvise and make something work. It was miserable to throw. My arms were on fire. It was not the right rod to be doing with it, but it's a glass rod, so it kept them pinned. I didn't lose any on that bait. This one I was throwing on more of a I felt like it was an oversized jerkbait rod. It was more of a square bill rod.
Mm-hmm.
And then these guys, I had them on just spinning rods. And then this one I had on my dedicated jerkbait rod. I really like this bait. You can cast it into the wind, and it's got that flicker in there.
Yeah.
And it has a weight transfer system in it, so you can cast it into the wind a country mile. So if the wind was going to pick up more, I probably would have had this in my hand more. But due to the fact the wind didn't pick up that much, I could get away with throwing these little bit bigger baits, and then just cracking them down onto the piles. And like every pile had 10 to 15 fish come up off of them, every single cast. And I just let that 60 sweep over that pile. And I was targeting either the bigger boulders within the pile, had a lot of the bigger fish on it, or kind of the ends of the pile had a lot of fish on it, kind of where the break line was between the sand and the rock would meet. I had a lot of fish coming off of that kind of stuff. And yeah, I mean, I just went down the bank and just weeded through a ton of fish.
Right. You must have had the most hazardous kayak on the water. I'm thinking of all the treble hooks at one time.
Well, if you notice in my photos, I was wearing my knee-high boots. And it wasn't because it was cold or anything like that. It was just because for the amount of fish I was catching, if I was putting them in the net, they would just start rolling and get tangled in my net. So a lot of the smaller ones, I was just boat flipping them onto my deck and letting them go crazy on my deck for a couple seconds before I could get pliers on them and just shake them off over the boat. And I had those tall boots on so I wouldn't get trebles in my legs.
Yeah, those mega bass hooks, I've gotten a few in me, and I'm like, how did that happen? Like you barely have to touch them, and they're in deep.
Yeah.
So for people watching, and are maybe don't understand what you mean when you say you cycled through. How many rods? We talked about this before, but tell them how many rods you had rigged up with jerk baits, because most people don't do this.
So I had 7 rods with jerk.
Yeah.
And then I had 7 jerk baits on, and I had a drop shot on, and that was about it. And
see, that's crazy.
One of my rods was a DRT Tiny Clash, and I was throwing that like a jerk bait in practice, and I ended up catching some on it. And that's when I kind of knew, like, these fish want to eat a jerk bait. They want something moving, and even they were coming up to eat that DRT Clash, which was that's like a 7-inch bait, and they were coming up on it. I wish I had some glide baits with me, but I didn't pack any glide baits. But if I had a glide bait with me, I could have done some serious damage on some big ones.
Yeah, even I mean, like I will often have multiple baits, 3/4 ounce chatterbait, 1/2 ounce, but 2, 3, maybe, not 7. Like I would need, if I was going to do something like that, because I like to junk fish, I would have to have like 7 additional rods to my normal 12.
You can't fit 7
I know you
more.
can't, right? Like, so that's, it would be really hard, because I love to just bring, even if there's one lay down on the lake, I want to be able to flip into it, so I'll bring like a flipper rod. So, but that's crazy. I mean, but that's what it takes to win, right?
Did you figure these out one at a time, Jake? Like, did you cycle through during practice, or is it like, did you go through like dry spells and then you tie another one on and they're like, oh shit, now this one works?
Yeah, I was rotating. When I was catching like 100 fish, I was just rotating through baits. Like every 10 or 15, I'd like, these hooks are getting mangled. I'd just throw it in a cup holder and grab a new one out. And I tried some pink ones. I tried some of those like chartreuse ones. I had so many jerk baits on my deck at the end of the last day of practice, and finally I got keyed into kind of what they wanted, and that was that bigger, oversized jerk bait that could get down to them. And I had a lot of these ones weighted too. Like I was wrapping them and weighting them to be so that they would perfectly suspend, because I had some that I had pre-weighted them at my house before I had left in a tank. And because
I've never done that.
Yeah, a lot of times in that cold water, I did a lot of cold water jerkbait fishing at the end of the year, and if they slowly rise up like this, just ever so slightly, they don't bite them. So you want it to slash, 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 and then completely sit still and suspend. And if that bait wasn't doing that, I think they would just, if they came up and were inspecting it, they didn't like it. So I had a lot of my baits pre-weighted. This one I didn't have weighted. This one I was slashing super, super aggressive, and I think a lot of those big fish just like that on that lake. They wanted it. Some of them wanted it really fast. You had to just play the mood of that pile. Like every pile was a little bit different, and you just had to play the mood of how they were reacting to the bait on live scope and coming up to it. If they were coming up on it really, really hot, I just kept slashing it as fast as I could, and one of them would eat it. But if they were coming up super slow, staring at it, and you just twitch, and then they come a little bit more, twitch, they come a little bit more, those are the fish that weighted jerkbait really played for me.
Now, did any of them, like, if you roll up to one of those piles, catch a bunch of fish, did you have to switch any out to get them, did they become accustomed to that?
Yeah.
And then stop biting, and then you threw something new and it fired them up again?
Yeah, I had so many piles, so I would probably catch 2 to 3 fish off each pile, and I just keep going.
Yeah.
There was no reason to slow down, because I felt like the most aggressive fish, the biggest fish on those piles, were coming up and eating the bait for the most part. And if I was catching 14s and 15s off of those, I just kept going. And I had a lot of the piles marked that had the bigger fish on them from practice. And some of them had no fish on them, which I was very strange to me. And then some of my other piles were still all sitting there waiting for me.
Wow.
And I had some bigger fish. Like I think one of my biggest one I caught was just a random floater. So as I was moving between the piles, I just had the scope facing out deeper, and it was a random suspender. And in practice, I'd caught 2 or 3 randomly suspending, and yeah, they were crushing a flatworm. on a drop shot. So
I was going to ask, you did catch some on a drop shot?
I only caught one that stayed in my bag on a drop shot, but I think it was my biggest one. And wow. I knew that there wasn't many of them suspending out there. I felt like the bigger females were out there, and the ones that hadn't quite slid up all the way. But they were solos, just one big ones. There was a lot of carp out there too that kind of had to weed through. I saw them sitting way up high on the surface, so I knew there were some carp, but I know kind of the difference between them now. So you can just tell. But yeah, the jerkbait got it done for the most part. Man,
that's really cool. We didn't get on the water on Sacandaga until Friday to do some footage, and I'm kind of glad we didn't get out there until Friday, because if we got out there on Wednesday, because we kind of made I don't know if it was a stupid call or not, but we kind of made the decision that if we're not going to fish the tournaments, we're not going to fish the tournament bodies of water either, just so that there's no,
I think it's the right call.
It is the right call. It's hard for us as anglers to sit there and we got on there. Was it Friday morning, Ken? And I saw all those rock piles come on.
Right. Same. And I was like, oh my God, this looks amazing. And you want to fish. And then, we did some filming and saw people I saw Corey Walker. He caught one on a Senko. Jonathan Richardson caught one on a crankbait. They were catching them on everything. So
and they were catching them almost at will, right? They weren't the the winning fish, but there were some people that were like, oh, you want to fish? I just got to go over here. And
it was a limited time I was out there. You know what I mean? I did see a number of fish caught. So it looked like fun. It's just that's all it looked. It looked fun.
There were certain banks that were just dead. I mean, they looked very similar, but there was one key aspect that I found about certain banks. But if we go back, I'm not going to talk about it. But there was one key aspect to certain banks there that just had the bigger quality of fish, and there's only 3 or 4 spots on the whole lake that had that, and it just made those banks good. Because there was another bank I went down for 3-4 miles, and I think I caught 2 fish on that bank, but everything set up very similarly to where I was fishing, and they just weren't there. But I liked the lake. It was great. It felt good to just go to a lake and just catch a ton of fish.
Yeah, well, that's really cool. Yeah. So Jake, I got a question for you, and reveal what you would like. Don't if there's anything that you have that's a little bit secret, don't reveal it. But I think I'm curious how electronics worked for you in Great Sacandaga. But first, I think for folks who aren't aware, if you could kind of walk us through a general overview of the electronics you have set up on your boat at any given time available to you, and then how it worked out for you on Sacandaga.
Yeah, so on my boat changes a lot throughout the year depending on where I'm going and what I'm doing. So some days I have my boat completely stripped down with no graphs, no electronics, go up shallow and catch them up. But for a lot of these northern lakes that we go to with the smallmouth and big lakes, big suspended fish, so I'm running a Helix 10. And that Helix for me sometimes is just a standalone mapping unit with a Lake Master chip in it. And then other times it's a dedicated 360 unit for me. And then I also have a Garmin 1022 GPS map. And that's a dedicated live scope unit for me. The one thing with Sacandaga was I was using that Garmin for mapping due to there was no mapping from Humminbird on that lake. And the Lowrance mapping was completely off. And then the Garmin mapping was the closest that I found for that lake. But then I also run a Lowrance. And then my Lowrance is my waypoint unit. It has 5,000 waypoints on it right now and still counting. And that one just is all my waypoints. I run mapping on it, and that's all for just lining up on stuff. And then I also side scan off of that unit as well. Yeah.
Wow. So is that based on how you feel each one, the strengths of each one?
Yeah. So they all have their time and place. They all do something a little different for me. And the Garmin's always just going to be a live scope unit for me. But the Humminbird mapping, I found so many little sneaky spots with the Humminbird mapping. And then sometimes I pull up all 3 mapping, and the Humminbird shows me something that the other 3 don't, or the shows me something that the other ones don't. So I've definitely seen the benefit of running all three. It's a lot to manage, and most people would get overwhelmed with it, but I've got a system down and you can always press the off button on them. So
yeah, I think that's the tough part for me. So I'm using forward facing for the first time this year. Yeah. I finally have figured out how to use it. And I say finally, I had to force myself to use it for a couple days to really see it. And I kind of get it now, but I also get that it does make things easier, but it also adds variables. And one of those is like, at what point do I turn this off and go hammer docks, right? Like,
yeah.
And that's always the conundrum. I think, especially on, 8 hours, I think to some people on the water might seem like a lot, but on a tournament day, holy crap. And that decision, is like a critical piece. Like, you got to be, I think Seth Feider said it in an interview recently, you got to be like either all in on it or not, because like you got to like kind of turn some of your instincts off and just listen to what's in front of you or not. And that's like been, and I'm not even talking about in like tournaments, I'm talking about just fun fishing for me, that decision is just tough to make sometimes. You don't want to miss out and you just don't know which way is the right one.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a lot of people that half use it, and that's why they're getting beat by some of these people that are fully using it. Like, there is certain lakes where, I'm going to turn it on this one little rock pile, and, they're not here. I'm going to turn it right back off and go back up onto the bank. But then there's like a lot of some guys just are so committed to the technology. They have so many hours behind it. They trust the technology. They can trust the technology all the way up into 5-6 feet of water and all the way out to 100 feet of water. And that's their deal. They put ungodly amount of time into the technology, and they're getting rewarded by the amount of time they're putting into it. But then there's also times where it's not the deal, and they're trying to force that live scope bite that's just not really going on, and then they can't bail back to their traditional fishing. So that's what you're starting to see now, is people trying to overcommit to using live scope when there's still a great bank bite going on. And I see it a lot. It's like, there's a great live scope bite going on, but a lot of people are still over missing, like, hey, you can go down the bank and catch 100 inches skipping a Senko under docks, and you're out here catching 15s and 16s on rock piles on scope, which is good too, but you can still get beat on the bank.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to put it too, because that's the struggle, right? Like, you're out there catching fish, and maybe they weren't having luck initially, like on the shore. But like you said, you might be catching 60 fish, but in the tournament, those aren't the ones that are going to win it. It's the ones on the docks. And like, how many of those during tournaments, those last minute dock fish, like that happens all the time.
It's just tough. If you love fishing, like, I'll get out there, and if I'm catching crappie, like, I'll know they're crappie, you know what I mean? And I'll catch like 3 or 4 of them just because, and then I'm like, all right, I gotta stop this shit. I gotta move on, but it's a lot of fun because it's just, you like fishing. But so for some people, they're catching 15, 16-inch bass. It's hard to go away from that. The whole don't leave fish to find fish, right? But sometimes you have to.
But then there's also situations like, I have a lot of local lakes that these fish, like, they just don't bite. I mean, I cast at 80 to 100 fish in a day, and I'm lucky to get 6 or 7 of them. And they're deep water, big largemouth that just cruise around, and they don't really eat that much. But the 1 or 2 of them that go down and eat it are 5-pounders. So like, there's certain things like that people don't realize, like how many fish most people are actually casting at to put that great limit together. And on certain lakes where it's tough, you might be casting at 100+ fish in a day before you catch that limit of, you're lucky to get 8 to 10 bites. But then there's other places like Sacandaga where you're catching 100 fish in a day. Every third cast, you're getting a bite, and
some of those
crazy.
A lot of fun.
Yeah. So
so one of the things, Jake, that we hear a lot, or that we've been told a lot, is like in the kayak fishing sort of, just I would say kayak fishing tournament scene in general, is like, if you hear a lot of like, people with the forward facing always win, and people with the most technology always win, kind of being critical of that advancement. But I think a lot of times what we hear too is like this sort of people kind of imply it comes easier for other people than others when it comes to like just winning or having success in general. But what advice would you give to somebody who's considering picking up forward facing sonar, or if we don't want to just pigeonhole it to forward facing sonar, fishing tournaments in general? Like, what piece of advice would you give them for either getting started or just improving their success?
Yeah, I mean, learning your unit is a big thing. I mean, I had a lot of time behind my units before I bought scope, and then again, like knowing when to bring it and knowing when to leave it in the truck. Like that's a hard decision for a lot of people, is knowing when to bring your live scope, not to bring your live scope, dialing in certain things with the live scope, and um, it can be a distraction. It can be what saves your tournament day. And definitely, like, if you are going to be purchasing a unit, purchase a unit that you can put live scope onto in the future, so that you don't have to buy a second unit in the future. So, like, and then pick what brand you want to go with and learn that brand inside and out, so that you know what's going on. Because I see a lot of people that they just don't even set their fish finder up. They just plug it in, they put it on their boat, and they say, "Oh, I got a fish finder now. I can use it for depth and temperature." That's for, like, they got a 10-inch screen that they're using for depth and temperature. Like a meat thermometer can do. Yeah. So learning your unit, like, a lot of people don't even understand like side scan on the units, and like I've found so much stuff on side scan. It's unbelievable. I found kayaks, I found boats just out in the abyss, and like you can't find that stuff just sitting out there scoping. Like you might run into one of them or two of them, but just side scanning a lot. And there's been days where I just go and side scan for 8 hours before a tournament, and you find like these little sneaky things, like a tree that's out in 20 foot that no one really knows about. Or I found tires on Cayuga that had fish on them, like crazy stuff. And on these big barren flats that are out there, you can just find little things that just hold fish every time. Or you can get that kicker bite on a tree that's out in 20 foot, or something random that you find that, and you normally never see anyone else on it, because it takes a lot of time to find that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Like random.
That's the key though, is time, right? Is that time on the water, time with the gear, time fishing in general, right?
Yeah, I can tell you, I didn't see my bait on scope for the first 40 hours I used it when I first bought it on active target, and it was all one setting. That was all. I just had noise rejection on high, or noise rejection. Yeah, I think noise rejection high, and I clicked it to low, and I could just see everything. And I was like, oh, there's wasted 60 hours of fishing trying to see my bait. It's just small stuff like that. And certain brands are a lot easier to adjust. Like the Active Target has a lot less settings on it, and then the Garmin has a lot of settings that you can definitely play with.
Yeah, I think I saw a recent Instagram post of yours with the. It doesn't matter where you're fishing, but the image was excellent on it. And I remember like kind of comparing it to what I see in my active target. And I'm new to it, but I'm starting to like mess with settings, and I'm definitely seeing your points about like when you get it, you have to dial this stuff in for yourself and figure out what you like. But I remember seeing it, like that picture after I saw the picture you posted, like I was ready to buy a Garmin like instantly. But you're right, it's not a matter of like the functionality, it's the matter of the settings and how you like it.
Of adjusting your settings, or just leaving them. Like I leave my settings a lot. I'm only adjusting, fine tuning my settings based on the water. Like if there's pollen in the water, or if there's a lot of pine needles in the water, you got to adjust your settings a little bit or if you're going up shallower, you can adjust your settings, get a cleaner picture. But for the most part, I feel like a lot of people get too deep into their settings and they're changing them way too much, and then they lose that, like, what you're looking for. Like the subtleties you start to learn the longer you use it. Like all you're looking for is this tiny little flicker of difference on the bottom when they're on these boulders, and you can just see that tiny little flicker, and it makes you throw a jerkbait over them, and they come up off the bottom. Like starting to learn those little fine-tuned things, that's really what separates you from everybody. Because if LiveScope was such a game changer, everybody would be tied. There'd be a coin flip at the top if it was such a difference maker. I mean, probably 60% of our field is going to be using it, and everyone's going to have a different experience with it.
Yeah, it's Well said. I think that's the part that's missed, and that the part that for me has been the surprise is just like the getting it, plugging it in, and then being like, now what? And realizing like, oh crap, it's not, because the debate is always like, is it good? Is it cheating? Is it ruining the sport? It's never like, how do I use it? Right. Yeah. Or like, why are people having luck with it? Because that's the part that like the population you're not hearing from is the people like me who like plugged it in and were like, within, I think I found out that I had it set up wrong like 3 different ways. And it was for like our first like EKF staff tournament thing we did at Sacandaga. And I ended up being on the side of the boat the rest of the day. But it was like I had to finally like just dial it in. And all the while I was like so excited to see it. I got there, my dreams were immediately crushed because I didn't know what I was doing. And so yeah, I finally figured it out. I would say like not this most recent weekend, the weekend before, I finally figured it out, learned to see my bait. I was fishing with Ken, Steve Smith, and Chris Pendergast, and it was it was just awesome. Like it was really cool, but it wasn't that simple. But once you find them and figure it out, like I can see it, and I can see how dialing it in. Like Steve had his settings a certain way. I don't know how, so I'm not just like being awkward about it. But so he was seeing things at times where I wasn't, and then Ken had a Garmin, so sometimes he would see stuff that we weren't seeing. And it was really cool, but also I think the point you made earlier, like also like really overwhelming because I was so focused on my screen at one point, I started bumping into somebody's dock and I had no idea, right? Like I just kind of lost sight with the fact that I'm not just out here drifting with an Xbox in front of me. Like there's, the boating aspect to it also. So
yeah, I feel like a lot of people don't talk about the pole mounts either, like what mount you're running on your boat and how you have your mount set up. Certain people run different mounts for a different reason, and there's some really good homemade mounts out there, and there's some really bad homemade mounts I see people running, and it's just like you already spent the money on it. Like invest the extra couple $100 into a good pole mount, and you'll have so much more luck with them. I've tried a bunch of different pole mounts, and there's some great ones out there and some really bad ones out there. And running a good pole mount that you can do some little things to make that picture different. Like I can pivot my pole mount a little bit back and forth. So it's only about 1 inch, but I can push it forward and see a little bit different of an angle, and I can pull it back and see a different angle. So
no kidding.
Just those little things. And on certain pole mounts, you just can't do that. In other pole mounts, you can. So it's just that little stuff, and getting a good pole and a pole mount in general helps.
How many in the installs you're doing? How many at the shop? How many are going out of the door with forward facing on them?
I saw a lot this year. Probably have done close to 10 builds with it on there.
Wow.
More than I've seen. I've seen just a lot of electronics going out on kayaks in general. I think it's taking off, and I think people are realizing that you can put live scope on kayaks, and then also running enough power. I feel like people just don't talk about what batteries you need to run all these units and having enough power to get you through your full day.
Yeah.
Because the worst thing is you're on a live scope bite and something doesn't go right, or people running too small a gauge of wire, so they're not getting the best picture possible on a kayak.
Oh, there's a crazy amount of lessons I've learned from trial and error when it comes to wiring and how much of a difference it can make. I think it's a great point. Is the like you purchase this thing, and depending on how much you pay for it, it may vary. But you're right about the mount, and it's like, why would you want to? Yeah, like it's to get the full advantage of it, you got to kind of be all in, and it's clearly like a luxury item when it comes to fishing, right? Like to me, it's like if you could only pick like 10 things to go fishing, I don't know that would make the 10 like essential things. But if you had the opportunity to take whatever the heck you wanted, then it's one of those good things to bring. But you're right about the batteries and the wiring just in general, the electronics. That's the part that I think kind of gets complex. Probably why people are having you do it instead of doing it themselves. Because it just gets to be a lot on a boat, and then keeping it all organized can be a nightmare as well.
Yeah, I run a power harness in my boat right now. Well, a homemade power harness. So
yeah, I got to check that out. Ken, you should check those out.
I'll have somebody else do it. That's what I was just gonna say. It could be like me and just suck at doing that kind of thing. So pay somebody else to do it.
It's pretty easy power harness, and I know Nick's running a power harness in his boat too.
So here's the thing: I don't know what a power harness is.
Yeah, so
that's why I don't do that.
Yeah,
I have no idea. I mean, I can probably guess, but
it's a really high gauge of wire, like an 8-gauge wire, running to like these little breaker bars, and from that breaker bar, all your little tag ends from all your stuff runs into that little breaker bar. So what it does is it shoots the cleanest power to your units possible. So you're not getting voltage drop. It like people running, they'll run like this really small, thin, tiny wire, just because that's what they think's the best. The longer you run that wire, the lower voltage drop you're getting. So you lose voltage by the time you get up to the unit. So running a power harness, you can see the difference in the photos. Definitely, it helps. It's worth putting a little bit of time into building a power harness, or you can go get pre-built ones. I know Bass Fishing Electronics, he makes custom power harnesses in Auburn, in Manchester area. And you can go over there and he'll cut you one up for the size of your kayak, and you can just throw that in. So, yeah, it really helps.
May help me, because there are times where I'm pretty positive that I should have a clearer picture than I do.
Yeah.
Voltage drop's a real thing. I don't think people realize it. Like, even I learned about it through my motor guide, and then I swapped all of my motor wiring with 6-gauge because I had a 14-foot kayak. The batteries, like the motor and battery, couldn't be further apart, right? So I just noticed like I wasn't getting the speed of somebody with the same exact kayak. So then I swap it out with all 6-gauge, and I think I got like 0.2 or 3 faster out of my motor guide just from not having to deal with that drop. And better plugs and plugs and outlets. The Marine Co. That's thanks to you, Jake. I've been running those ever since, the 70 amps.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's the best plug on the market, hands down. And if you're having problems with plugs and you're not running that plug, you're just waiting for something bad to go wrong. And they're not a cheap plug. They're like $50-$60 a piece, sometimes more, depending where you're getting them from. And they're a great plug, though. I run them on all my boats, and I can honestly say I've never had to switch one out. I've never had one burn out. It's just such an overrated plug for what we're using them for, that it can just take the abuse, and they're waterproof and they don't fail.
It's not like I don't think I've had a speck of like corrosion on anything from them. Like,
yeah. And you pair it with a good marine grade wire in your boat, and if you're running something other than like 8-gauge, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah. But I feel like I got issues with, I mean, we all have issues with Motor Guide, I'm sure, but I feel like their user manual really needs to be updated, because they talk about a 50 amp breaker, like 8-gauge wire, and I think they mention you can use 6. I don't know, I can't remember, but I couldn't, once I switched to 6, I couldn't believe the difference. Like, everything just worked. You never had issues with like overheats, nothing like that.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that, like, especially with 12-volt wiring in particular, it's like, it gets super hot, and then if the wire is being maxed out, then it's just getting super hot as well, and then you're gonna draw up over time.
Power,
yeah. And I just got stranded way too many times. I'm just now everything's overkill. Like, I don't want to be stranded with that stuff.
Yeah, because the last thing you want is to be 3 to 5 hours away from home and having stuff go wrong. Like, get up dialed in to where nothing breaks, or having the parts in your truck to fix stuff that breaks is a big deal that a lot of people don't talk about. Like, having backups on backups on backups. Like, I can't tell you the amount of times I've had to repair something in a parking lot and having the stuff with me that broke. And because we're hard on our gear, our stuff gets up, and having extra props, and anything can go wrong. And the last thing you want to do is be driving 2.5 hours to go find a Bass Pro to get a prop.
That's the thing. If you don't bring it, there will not be one around. Like, you're basically guaranteeing there won't be like a Bass Pro in 3 hours away, whatever. Yeah, I travel with almost a complete kit to redo my motor on my boat. Like, that's like the one essential thing. So it's like I have spare wire, spare plugs, spare outlets, spare breakers, like enough to redo the whole thing, battery box, everything. And then except the remote. I got to knock on wood on that one because that's probably the most critical piece for any motor guide user.
Yeah, I've gone through probably 8 remotes now.
I was telling somebody the other day, if they can find someone who can solder those boards, they could have such a ring fixing motor guide remotes, like $20 a pop.
I would send them all in.
Yeah, it would be, somebody would have a very lucrative business on their hand. I looked for it the other day, and these people just do like big money, like hard drive things. So it's like probably not worth it for them. But anyway, so transitioning from that's what I was planning to do, is the forward facing transition into. Yeah. So any predictions for this weekend? So that's what we're going to get into. We're going to get into a preview of Winnipesaukee, a lake you know pretty well, Jake. I'm not going to ask if you've been fishing or whatever, but what do you think people who haven't? I know he has. I'm not going to ask him about it.
From one of my spots, I heard.
Oh, geez. Yeah, this kayak fishing ring is quite a rumor mill. But
I don't think it was a rumor.
I know it's fine. I'm just joking. But Jake, how would you describe Winnipesaukee to folks who may not have been up here? Because we've heard from a couple of people that surprisingly haven't fished Winnipesaukee before.
Yeah. It's a deep, clear glacier lake. It gets really deep. Super, super clean water. There's a lot of boat traffic. Just get ready for boat traffic. I've had people pull right up next to me and just start chatting, asking me how my day is. I had a lady paddle across my line in the 6 a.m. Had a lady just kayaking across the middle of the lake and just paddled right across my line. And I mean, I'm the only one out there. Either side of me, and she had to paddle right across, like 5 feet in front of me. Didn't say a word, just paddled across and just kept going. So you definitely get into the weird run-ins. I mean, especially with the rigs that a lot of people are running. People just have questions. They see you out there, and it does stink when you got people pulling up on you doing donuts and jet skis just to ask you some questions. But the boat traffic is crazy out there. Definitely run a flag, wear a high-vis shirt if you got one. Something that people can see you from far away, because a lot of boaters are not very good boaters on this lake.
Yeah. And when you say, I mean, I think some people, if you just go to Google Maps and just kind of look at the lake, that gives you an idea. I can never remember this, but
about
how many boats a day hit that lake? Do you know? Somebody told me once, and it was like thousands.
Yeah, I think Mike Iaconelli put a post out about that a couple of years ago when he came up for the Hobie.
Yeah.
I want to say it was like some ridiculous number, like 10,000 boats.
I thought it was like 7,000.
Yeah.
And now when I think about it, I'm like, that can't be right. But if you just look at Google, I mean, it's like, it probably is.
Yeah.
It's a huge lake, and you can just see the boats everywhere.
Yeah. I was praying for rain for this tournament, because if it rains out there, nobody's out there.
Yeah, nobody will be out there. Yeah.
Right now, it looks like we're gonna have some of the best traffic. Hot, no wind, and sunny.
Nice. Yep. Now, does this? I'm assuming the answer of this is absolutely, but do the wake boats, are they out there yet? Yeah.
Pontoons, the wake boats, the guys just salmon trolling.
Oh, the trollers.
Yeah.
The Mount Washington, which, by the way, if you haven't been up here and you see a boat that looks way too big to be on a lake, it is there. It's the Mount Washington, and it does throw a hell of a wake. It's not like, not like Run for the Hills, but like if you fished St. Lawrence last year and the barge went by and you didn't notice, it's not like that. Like that, it's the opposite of that. So be ready. It's not like crazy dangerous, but just be aware it does throw a decent wake.
Being on your toes on this lake is definitely something. If you're going to be out in the boating lanes, which most people are going to be, just being aware of what's going on around you and where the boat wakes are coming from. It can be slip calm on Winnipesaukee, but you're still fishing in foot waves from all the boat traffic.
Yeah, the main lake areas.
And all those areas.
Yeah, you got these, I call them triangles, where you got a boat wake coming from 3 different directions, and it just picks you up and puts you down. Picks you up and puts you down. Yeah. And those are, you got to be paying attention, because if you're off balance and you got a big set of 3 of those coming in at you, it can get pretty hairy out there. But I mean,
and there are a lot of rocks, so those areas, there might be a giant boulder near you, and a wave's coming that's not that big. It hits that boulder, and now it's a big wave. And if you're not ready,
it's like a washing machine out there sometimes. But other times it's it. So you never know. It all depends what stretch you're in and how many people are out on the lake.
So what do we think? We've talked about forward facing. We think you think that's going to win it this weekend? Or you think
you never know. There's a lot of giant largemouth in there, and we have seen some big largemouth numbers being put up in the spring. I know I followed a lot of the boat tournaments this spring, and they were bringing in some monsters. There was a lot of 7+ pound largemouth brought in this year, and largemouth can definitely play. They're few and far between, and I know I'm going to try to mix a largemouth into my bag this weekend, and but they're few and far between. It's like a lottery ticket scratcher. If someone's got them dialed in real good, then good for them, because I still struggle to find them consistently out there. But I know there's guys that can catch them out there consistently, and they catch big ones.
It was our first season we had, our first EKF season, I think, was one. First or second was one on largemouth. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken. So it is possible. And
that was that guy. He caught a 22, right?
Yeah. That was August or September.
Yeah,
I think. So that I say that not to say it's going to be a largemouth, but there are winning largemouth in this lake. It's just this time of year, finding them can be more difficult. But yeah,
but there are big smallies that are shallow, and I know some areas that you can get some really good ones shallow. Obviously, they're going to be deep as well. But I think either way, I think there's going to be a ton of fish caught.
Yeah. Winnie's full of fish. There's just fish everywhere. I think this tournament can be won out of any boat ramp. There's winning fish out of every boat ramp on Winnipesaukee, and it's hard to pick a boat ramp just because I think there is winning fish potential out of every single boat ramp.
Oh yeah, I believe it.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think when it comes to the boat traffic? Better or worse than Wall and Pawpack?
I don't think there'll be anything worse than Wall and Pawpack. I've never played like there, and none of them use the middle of the lake. They like to just hug the buoys and go around on plane in circles for hours and hours and hours.
That was I don't know that I've ever been in and thankfully I don't think I've ever been in another tournament quite like that one. There was I don't know. There was something.
At least on Winning, I feel like they stop more and they kind of just hang out, float around.
Oh yeah, they're easier. They're not as in dangerous spots.
Yeah,
as dangerous. They still get there, but
yeah.
I just messed up my own question.
You can start over.
No, I didn't mess it up. I can't remember it. I lost my question. Yeah, that was my question. I think isn't the record what's the record largemouth out of Winnipesaukee? Isn't it 10? But it's ice fishing, I think. It's over 10, I think.
Yeah, I've heard of some big ones, and I know a guy that caught one that was over 9 pounds out of Winnipesaukee. Yeah. And there's some giants in there. I know there was 8 caught out of there this spring.
Wow. That's cool.
And more with forward facing sonar as people progress and get better at it, you'll probably see a lot of those being caught, like, just what would 12.58 at Cayuga Largie.
That was
caught. Ridiculous. How old is that fish? Wild. And then they had a 9 something smallie, right? Is that the both state records? It's crazy.
Wait, that bass largemouth came out of Cayuga?
Yeah, I believe so. Yep.
I listened to the podcast that they talked about. He caught it on a Sanko, so they still work.
Sanko. He wasn't forward facing. He wasn't out deep.
I don't know if he was. I think when they talked about it, I think he said 10 to 12 foot of water on a grass line that met to a rock pile. I want to say.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Crazy. Wow. I just assumed forward facing because you just don't see that happening, or you didn't see it happening before. Now you're seeing it a lot more.
Imagine.
I don't know.
Imagine telling that guy. Imagine not knowing he had the record right going out to him. Be like, yeah, I don't do Senkos. I'm not. Senkos don't play anymore. And that guy's like, yeah, you shouldn't throw.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, put those down. You don't want that. Yeah, that was insane. That was an insane looking fish.
Yeah.
All right. What do we say? Getting to that. We're getting a video about that time.
Yeah. No, just this weekend's gonna be fun. I wish I was fishing. We're gonna fish. Hold on. Alarms. Yeah, where should we fish? Locally.
Where should we do a staff event, Jake?
Staff event.
There's a lot of good ones. It depends what you guys want to go do, but Winnipesaukee is a great one, kind of in that area.
Yeah, definitely.
I like Winnipesaukee.
I was thinking about Newfound. It's been a long time since I've gotten up to Newfound.
Newfound's a good one. You guys might want to look at that one for an event next year.
It's one we've looked at. It's launches are the constraint. That's honestly a big thing with New Hampshire in general. I think it was Winnipesaukee. We what year was it? We announced I think it was our first season. We announced a different lake, and then the ramps. We found out ramps just weren't a possibility. Sunapee. Yeah. And then we did which one? We were going to do one of the Squams, Winnipesaukee or Squam, and then we found out like there's 2 ramps and at least one will deny us.
Didn't they just do something for tournaments at Squam?
I
think they banned them.
Restriction.
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah, New Hampshire's killing it. There's amazing fishing. That's the top of the good part, though, is for our staff, and we don't need like anything like a permit or anything like that. But
any of those lakes. I mean, if we could ever find some offsite parking, I mean, even if we had to do like a, shotgun launch at the same launch,
Do Newfound then. It's got the big I've ever seen.
It's a big ramp. Yeah, it's a nice ramp.
I think you guys got to do a shotgun launch. I think that'd be an interesting one.
Oh gosh,
I'm looking at the ramp now.
That could be something. It is a big ramp. It's Wellington.
Yeah,
Wellington.
Just one ramp.
Yeah. So it's probably parks 200 cars. I'd have to say, massive.
Not the one I'm looking at. Oh, they got the dirt lot.
You drive through the state park.
So do people park in this field?
I don't know what you're looking at. There's a big parking lot. There's a huge parking lot.
There's not 200 spots in this boat ramp. There's probably 25.
You may not be looking at the right thing, or it might be old. Who knows?
Yeah. Okay. Well.
Yeah.
We'll take a look at it. I mean, definitely, if we could get some offsite parking too, because the state will only give us half.
Yeah.
But yeah, that'd be kind of interesting. Just have everybody going out the same lake. It's how long is this lake? It's not that long. 5 miles north to south.
Yeah.
Pre-spawn, I don't know that you'd find a more fun place.
You'd be seeing some mega bags coming out of there.
Pre-spawn, I remember fishing a boat tournament there, and we were jokingly no-look casting. Every single one was like 2-3 pounders, like a minimum of 2 pounds.
Yeah.
They just get so fired up.
Yep.
That's one of my favorites. But anyway, so for folks, one little thing before we wrap up here. So we're going to be filming content for for EKF Live, our broadcast on Saturday. If you are interested in being a part of an interview, doing a kayak walkthrough, Jake, this includes you, of course. But anybody that's fishing, let us know, and let us know what ramp you're planning to pre-fish out of, so that we can get to you, and it won't. We try to be in and out of there quick, so we're not getting in your way, impacting your pre-fishing. But if you'd like to do an interview for the broadcast content that goes on there, please let us know, and we'll do our best to get out there. We're trying to include everybody and open up to as many people that are interested. So shoot us a message, and we'll try to get out to you.
Yeah, and on the water footage, also, if you don't mind us coming out and filming you, let us know. Or if you want us to come out and film you, we'll give you some footage that you can use for sponsors and stuff. And we won't share it with anybody, obviously. We won't even show any of it until Saturday. So definitely let us know.
Cool. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight, Jake. Appreciate all the info. Yeah, Sacandaga was a really cool recap. Like, it was really, really cool to hear. So appreciate you sharing that. You want to give any shout outs to anybody, any sponsors or anything where people can find you on social media?
Yep. So I got Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Jake Angulas is pretty much where you can find me across all my platforms. Big thank you to Canoe, Sniper Marine, Enduro Power, and big thanks to EKF. You guys have really killed it and given us the opportunity for everyone in the Northeast to kind of show what we have up here. And I think it's rubbing off on some of the national trails. We saw the Cayuga tournament where a ton of people over 90 inches, and just feels good to finally get some recognition up here, and you guys are killing it, and I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jake. Appreciate that.
That.
Thanks everybody for tuning in, for watching, and hopefully we'll see you at Winnie.
Yeah.
Take care.
See you guys.
See ya.